Well, for the longest time, we thought it wouldn't happen. In fact, as recently as tonight, it still kind of felt surreal that Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor would box inside a ring in front of a crowd in Las Vegas, and people would actually be able to pay to watch this happen. But it happened, my friends. It actually happened. And in the end, Floyd Mayweather won via 10th round TKO. It was an entertaining affair. Conor McGregor did a hell of a lot better than many boxing pundits thought. And we'll be breaking it down right here alongside my two colleagues, Marc Raimondi, the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Of course, I am Ariel Helwani. It is the MMAfighting.com post-fight wrap-up, and we're standing outside the T-Mobile Arena here in Las Vegas, where moments ago, Floyd Mayweather defeated Conor McGregor inside that arena. It still kind of feels weird to actually say that it actually happened, but it did, Mark. What'd you think? Overall, now that it's over, no more guessing how it would go. We know how this story ends. What'd you think of the fight?
I think a lot of people thought that Conor McGregor, as an MMA fighter coming to boxing, was going to embarrass himself. I think most people in MMA and in boxing, in the media, pundits, thought that it wasn't going to go well for Conor McGregor, and in the end it didn't go well, but he didn't embarrass himself, not by any stretch of the imagination. I thought he won the first 3 rounds. I thought he was competitive in spots. He ran out of gas. Floyd Mayweather is one of the greatest boxers of all time. He's the best boxer of our generation. And McGregor hung in there for a good amount of time. I don't think we could expect anything more. He wasn't going to knock him out in the first round. That was never going to happen. I don't think we could have expected more than what he produced tonight, honestly.
It was interesting looking at social media immediately after the fight, Chuck, because you saw a lot of MMA fighters, including some of Conor's biggest enemies, guys like Eddie Alvarez, give him props, say that you represented us well. Do you feel like Conor represented the MMA community well tonight?
I do, and it's kind of a deep-rooted issue, and you kind of understood it as you're here, and there was all the interaction between the boxing media and the MMA media. I think that when you look at it, the MMA media had watched Conor McGregor, and I think there was just the boxing media who hadn't really watched him was kind of discounting the idea that he could stand in there and box. And it was difficult to explain to them, like, well, wait, we've watched him and we sort of know this. So it almost felt like it was more personal on a weird level that they're saying you don't know what you're looking at. And that's that was where it got strange in there. So it was nice to see him take it to, Floyd early on. It wasn't doing a ton of damage or anything like that, but he was, I think all 3 of us had him winning those first 3 rounds. And, that's when it was truly surreal, because we're sitting here like, wait a second, nobody does this to Floyd, and here's Conor McGregor, who's not supposed to be in the ring with him, doing exactly that. So there was a little bit of a redemption, because we've watched Conor McGregor come up to this point, and you knew what he's capable of, and I felt like he put that even beyond what I expected. He put that all on display tonight, and man, everybody came out a winner, I think, tonight.
It's interesting because he did, in my opinion, win the first 3. You can argue that he even won the 4th. And yet you look at the judges' scorecards, one judge gave him the first 3, then gave Floyd the next 6, and the other 2 judges just gave him the first. Bizarre scorecards, no?
Yeah, I don't agree with that, obviously. They have a better vantage point than we all had, so I don't know exactly what they were seeing. Was Conor landing and doing damage to a lot of those shots in the first 3 rounds? Probably not. He was throwing a good amount. Was he landing a ton at a great percentage? Probably not. But on the other hand, Mayweather wasn't doing a whole lot of offense. He wasn't really mounting much offense at all in the first 3 rounds. So I thought he won the first 3. The punching stats, I think, were 51-40 through 3, I want to say, or 3 through 4 for Conor. And then Floyd took over from there. But the first 3 rounds I thought were Conor, and then the 4th round was competitive, and then cardio kind of gave in. And look, Mayweather he figured him out. Conor even said it. He adjusted, and talking about Mayweather, adjusted his game plan 3 different times during the fight, and the third one was the charm in this case, when he kind of came in and got close and worked the body. That's really what the key was.
Also interesting that he landed 111 punches according to CompuBox, and also according to CompuBox, that is more than 9 other fighters who have faced Floyd Mayweather in 12-round fights. This is 111 in 10, and Conor said he could have gone further. Now, what was also interesting was the game plan talk after the fact. Floyd said that was the game plan, to start slow, let him punch himself out, and then pour it on. So when you look at those first 3 rounds, which we did score in favor of Conor, do you think that he was dominating Floyd, or was Floyd letting him dominate him?
Well, that was part of it, I think, for sure, because I think all of us were like, why is he keeping his guns holstered? Why is he not returning fire? A couple of times in the, you could see that he was just, he was getting on the ropes and kind of letting Conor come in and take a couple shots, not taking any damage, like we said, but just, kind of playing Matador or something with him a little bit. And I kept wondering that myself. I'm like, now are we seeing an older, there was so much to sort out as that was happening, because you're like, are we just seeing an older version of Mayweather now? Or is this truly like Conor is better than we, thought he was going to? Well, you didn't know. And then you start to wonder about the game plan. And I thought that it became a little evident when I saw him, maybe in the 4th or probably the 4th round and the 5th round, you saw him open up with a couple of combinations and things like that. And I thought, okay, now we're starting to see it. And that obviously coincided a little bit with the fatigue that started to set in with McGregor. And, the rest was, he hung in there even through that fatigue. He kept trying to initiate the action in the beginnings of the rounds and all that stuff. But, yep, in the end, I just think that, it was a really interesting fight that had so many different layers to it. And you mentioned the 111 punches, and obviously Floyd was complicit in that. He stood in the pocket with him. How often do you actually see Floyd fight that way? He wanted to make that statement, and I think that was part of the reason he ate a few punches. So it was a fun Floyd fight. What more to the people who don't like?
When's the last time we said that?
Exactly. So I just feel like every side really came away from this about as good as you could. About as every single side of it, from the UFC's perspective, and because Conor didn't lose anything really other than a boxing match to one of the best guys in our modern era. So,
Mark, no one in combat sports, and maybe even sports in general, handles defeats quite like Conor McGregor. He's very honest, doesn't make a lot of excuses, and I think quite gracious. We saw that after the first Nate Diaz loss. We saw that again tonight, and he was actually, I thought, incredibly authentic in his recap of the fight, and saying that in sparring leading up to the fight, around the 6th round, he would get tired and he would start to think, I'm not going to make it to the end. And then once he got to the 11th, he got maybe a second wind. And that's exactly what we saw tonight. But you actually found a few stats. You went back and looked at how some other big names did against Floyd and how many punches they landed. And I think it kind of speaks to the volume and how tough he was hanging in there. Tell us about those numbers for a sec.
Yeah, Canelo against Floyd had 117 punches landed, and Pacquiao had 81, I believe, punches landed, and Conor had 111. So he was only 6 less than.
And those were in 12-round fights.
In last that went the distance, and so Conor had only 6 less than Canelo, and he had quite a bit more. Too hard for me to add right now after tonight. But yeah, I mean, what can you say, man? The expectations needed to be tempered for this. Let's just be honest about it. I mean, we were talking all week, and I think a lot of media members had a pretty strong indication that Mayweather would win the fight. He's one of the best boxers of all time, going against a guy who's 0-0. This is Conor McGregor's first professional boxing fight. He made a disclosed $30 million. It was in front of 14,000 people at T-Mobile Arena. It was his first boxing match, and it was funny when Jimmy Lennon Jr. said that when he introduced him. He said. And tonight, making his professional boxing debut, but he's no stranger to combat sports, something along those lines. But even hearing that, it's like this is we have to remember, like, being in the moment, it's easy to forget what actually just happened. But he's not a boxer. He's an MMA fighter, and one of the best MMA fighters. And he went in there, he went 10 rounds with Floyd Mayweather. Who in MMA could do that? Who could really do that? There are boxers who can't do that, and he did it, and he didn't do too bad, in doing it. Those numbers those numbers don't tell the whole story, but they tell enough of the story to come out and say. He didn't do too bad, and I don't think anyone in that arena was upset by how that went. I thought they enjoyed the fight, thought they appreciated Conor's warrior spirit, and they understand that Floyd Mayweather is one of the best of all time.
Yeah, and much like after UFC 196, when Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor to hand him his first UFC loss, it seemed like a lot of the haters came out of the woodwork and wanted to dance on his grave, and you saw that again tonight. But to me, that just speaks to, if you feel like you need to mock Conor's performance, maybe you don't appreciate who Floyd the boxer is. I'm not talking about the man, the boxer, one of the greatest ever, one of the greatest offensive fighters ever. For him to do that in his debut against someone like Floyd, Floyd's game plan or not, I hate to say it, that's a moral victory, and that's what 99% of the boxing pundits out there thought Conor couldn't do. He proved them all wrong, in my opinion, tonight, despite the fact that he didn't win. Do you agree?
I do agree, and it's one of those situations, man. no matter what he had done, let's just say the haters you're talking about, it didn't matter what he did. He could have gone in there and got that first round knockout, and they would have had another line of reason. He could have levitated across, and oh yeah, there's wires, you can see him. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't matter what he was going to do. People were going to criticize him because that was just part of this package. People drew such crazy lines through this thing that part of the fun of this, and you guys especially who followed it through the tour and everything else, part of the fun has been trying to sort it out. Where's the truth? Where's the truth to this whole process? And if there's basically what I saw in there was a guy who lived up to everything. He was saying some pretty remarkable things. He didn't get a knockout, but he just stood toe-to-toe with the guy who not a lot of, and he stood toe-to-toe and landed plenty of shots, and it was how he landed them too. A lot of the combinations he was landing, that he was using his jab. I don't think too many people were, thinking in these terms, like he'd be able to do this, and a couple of times where he'd sneak in an uppercut or work a body shot, and you're like, well, this is boxing, man. You're watching a guy outbox, and in some of these sequences, one of the greats. So to me, any criticism that he receives is completely unfounded at this point. I mean, I can't imagine what you're looking for from him to warrant that at this point.
Yeah, Floyd's 15-0 now. I'd love to go back and see how many times he's lost 3 rounds or maybe 4 rounds in a row, especially as of late. And yes, I know he had the 2 years off, but still, he's still Floyd Mayweather, and no one expected him to lose a step. I wanted to ask you about just the night in general, because I thought it was trending towards disaster. I thought it was a late arriving crowd. Yeah. I mean, up until the second to last fight, the Gervonta Davis fight, I mean, the place was more than half empty. Yes. Multiple reports of pay-per-view issues. Showtime forced to put out a statement that they were delaying the start of the main event due to the pay-per-view issues. The crowd, I thought, was dull, void of any energy. During the delay, there was no music. We were just kind of sitting there. And it just felt like there was nothing. I mean, it wasn't a sellout. I noted 9 empty sections above and around the 120 section. I mean, it was just shocking. It did not feel like a big event. It felt like something was missing. And yes, they're going to maybe break the pay-per-view record. Maybe they're going to break the gate record as well when it's all said and done. But it felt like it was trending towards a really bad night for boxing. And boxing tends to have big nights and then have them fall flat on their face. And then the main event happened, and I thought it delivered. Someone asked me, what would you grade it? B+ came to mind. I thought that if you paid $100 just to watch that fight, you got your money's worth and then some. You walk away, all right, I saw something. Do you feel like the main event saved what could have been a disastrous night for the sport of boxing?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt the same way that you did, because being in the arena, it was a different vibe than many UFC fights where there's a lot of energy in the building from much earlier on, because there are important, significant fights. Not that the Badu Jackson of the world and the Gervonta Davis of the world not significant, but the UFC promotes in a different way, and they emphasize more of the whole card and even some of the preliminary card. And there's music pumping, there's hip hop and some new rock, and some of the Face the Pain stuff that everyone is so excited. That of course my favorite. So yeah, there wasn't that energy in the room, in the arena, and then the main event started. It was a great fight, and by the end, I really felt like it all turned around. Now, I don't know what's going on at home. I'm sure a lot of people are probably upset. Maybe some people were not able to buy the pay-per-view. But in terms of in the arena, I felt like everyone was very, very satisfied with what they saw. And I just want to add one thing that from what Chuck was saying. We covered this all along with kind of like a wink and a nudge, like, hey, we know this fight is being put together, for the money. It's a little bit of a circus, a little bit of a carnival. But really, what happened tonight, it was really just a boxing match. There was nothing carnival or circus about it. Yeah, I mean, McGregor had some moments where he was, throwing some odd things, rabbit punches, but it really...
The referee was very lenient.
The referee was very lenient, no doubt about it. But it just felt like Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match against another boxer. Yeah. Even though the entire lead-up was just, oh, this is crazy, it's a circus, it's weird. Yeah, it was all that, but in the end, it was just a boxing match, and that was it.
A lot of people thought that Conor would get embarrassed. That certainly wasn't the case, but give all the credit in the world to Floyd. We're focusing on Conor maybe because we are the MMA guys, but let's not take anything away from what Floyd Mayweather did out there. Thought he boxed a phenomenal fight in the back end early on. Hard to tell exactly what the game plan was. He says that was the game plan, so we'll take his word for it. So now it's interesting as far as what is next for Conor McGregor. You said that you thought that this was a victory for all parties involved. Obviously, it's a victory for Floyd because he's now 15-0 and he rides off into the sunset, the promotion, Showtime, etc. But for Conor, he loses, but yet it still seems like once again he gains that respect. His stock goes up. The UFC wants him back, clearly. Dana White made that very clear. Do you feel like this was the perfect scenario for the UFC? He looks good, he loses, they get him back.
Yeah, I thought it was perfect for all parties, really. I mean, just everybody came out of it really with a perfect scenario. And honestly, it's how he loses. You know, just the way he comports himself when he shows up, and he's almost jovial about it. It's like he went through the experience. He understands big picture, so he shows up and he tells you about his experience. And that's that's so vicarious when you're a fan or a media member and you see somebody doing that. You're like, wow, he's telling me exactly what you kind of want to know. Like all the stuff you want to know about what was going on beforehand, what was going on during the fight. He's telling you all that. It goes over huge, I think, and especially on this stage where he's just kind of he's going through this size of an event, and he's telling you this stuff. You can see that there's a relief to be past it and go on to the next adventure, which for him is always a series of escalations. And everybody had that, so it's now back to the UFC. I'm assuming. I can't imagine he would just go do another boxing event right away. And he kind of made it sound as if he was going to get back to his jiu-jitsu and everything, and he's back into that. So it's going to set up, if it's the Diaz fight, it's going to be even way bigger now. Yeah. It's going to be way bigger than even the second one that broke all the records and everything else. So how can you not think that that's like a slam dunk victory, even in a loss? I think it's just one of those weird things, like he lost in just the right way and he explained himself and came across great. You know what I mean? I think the UFC fans they all like you were mentioning with the Eddie Alvarez and everything, there's a whole new respect for him going back to the UFC.
Perhaps his greatest skill is that he makes you want to see him more after losses, and that's very rare in fighting. So what is your prediction as far as what's next? Because everyone was trying to guess what's next before the fight. Now we know what happened in the fight. Dana White obviously wants him back. He called himself a free agent, which is technically inaccurate because he still has 4 fights left under his UFC deal. But do you think that he comes back this year, perhaps December 30th? Do you think he weighs his options, waits till next year? Do you think he boxes before he comes back to MMA? What do you think? What does your crystal ball say, Mark?
I don't think he fights again this year. I don't think that December, was it the 30th? I don't think that is in the cards. We're already at the end of August. I just can't imagine him going from a $100 million payday to fighting again at the end of the year. I just can't picture it. It's really going to depend on now who offers him the most money or who offers him the most interesting thing for his career. You know, the next step in this evolution that we've watched. The Nate Diaz trilogy. He's brought that up a couple times. He doesn't bring up. He brings up the belts, but he doesn't bring up Tony Ferguson. He doesn't bring up Khabib Nurmagomedov all that often, but he does bring up Nate Diaz. He brings it up often. So I think that is of a lot of interest to him because he knows it is the bigger money fight than even defending the title. It just is. But I still think that there is boxing out there for him. I really thought, and Paulie Malignaggi said it on your show, one of the, I think, 17 times he was on in the last 2 months. He said, it really depends on what happens in the fight. What the next step is for him, and could he get the fight with Conor? And I think that nothing about that fight made me think that I don't want to see Conor box someone. I don't want to see him box Canelo. I don't want to see him box Triple G. Would I want to see him box Paulie Malignaggi? Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't hate that. I don't know if that's what's next, but I think that he will think of all those things and he will do whatever is best for him. And it could be boxing. I'm not ready to say that the next step for him is going back to the UFC. Not yet.
What do you think? What does he do next?
It's funny that you mentioned, if I'm Paulie Malignaggi at this point, I'm doing every psychological trick in the book to try to get that fight, even though it's just perfectly set up for him to be the natural guy. If he's going to go boxing again, you've got a natural guy, and you actually have the step down and the bad blood. So you put those two things together, along with the idea that you said you want to you kind of get more intrigued with him after a loss, seeing how he responds. Obviously, this was his first. He's very open about like kind of fading in the middle and all that stuff. And you think, what does he do? What does he do? What does he correct? Of course you'd want to see all that stuff. And against a guy like Paulie Malignaggi. So I had no interest in that fight, but now I kind of do. It's weird. I said it kind of would have to be, you'd have to kind of judge it based on what happens in this fight. And I think that just enough happened in this fight to kind of open that door a little bit where I'm like, well, now I'm a little intrigued to see that. You know what I mean? But I still think that I don't think that'll happen right away, but I think if I'm Paulie Malignaggi, he has to feel like he's one of the forerunners to get his attention, to maybe do that. The bigger issue is Dana White just going to stand idle again or get involved? I just can't imagine it happening next. I really can't. But down the road.
They certainly need him now more than ever, especially with John Jones and his situation in limbo, and no Brock Lesnar, and no Ronda Rousey, who apparently got married tonight. So mazel tov to the happy couple. Still didn't get my invitation, which is a little upsetting. But overall, I thought it was a really fun night. And
It's weird. I got my invitation, but I was already busy. Whatever, man. I couldn't make it.
You picked this over that. Interesting choice. A lot of fun covering it with you guys. A lot of fun going through all the steps from the World Tour to the media workouts a couple of weeks ago to, of course, Fight Week. Couldn't thank all of you enough for all your support, checking out our coverage every step of the way, from LA to Toronto to Brooklyn to Vegas, back to Vegas again. All the coverage that we put out, you guys just kept coming back for more, and we really appreciate it. And it has been such a privilege covering this once-in-a-lifetime event, which, by the way, ended up delivering. The much polarized Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather fight, which many were quick to call a sham and a farce, in the end ended up delivering. And that's good news for all involved. That's good news for combat sports. And I think the lesson here, if I may, we said, I think, back when Conor was going for the lightweight title, we said that maybe his best trait was that he's not afraid to embarrass himself. And what Conor McGregor did tonight was find comfort in a very uncomfortable position, something that a lot of the people who choose to mock him, some of his contemporaries, because they weren't all positive, a lot of those people would never dare to dream to do what he did tonight. Now, I know $100 million, that softens the blow, and you could see he's a very happy man tonight drinking his Irish whiskey. But to put yourself out there against the best ever, arguably, is, in my opinion, quite the commendable feat. So salute to Conor McGregor, and salute to Floyd Mayweather for making it to 50-0 and capping off a Hall of Fame boxing career. We are done from here outside the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Again, thank you so much for watching our coverage all week long. Back on Monday for another MMA Hour, but for now we'll say goodnight. For Mark, Chuck, Casey, Esther, and the rest of the team, thanks again. Good night from Las Vegas. We'll see you on Monday.